First, let's go to the inner city suburb of of Richmond in Melbourne. If you're not a Melbourne person, it's absolutely right next to the MCG, so very much in the inner city. And this is where every day havoc is reaped on residents as a result of the Andrews government's drug injecting room that sits right next door to a primary school. Now, this week, as I was contacted by concerned residents who sent me images of what happens every day on the streets that were once a relatively safe residential area. You can see these images here of what appears to be drug deals outside the primary school, of course, next door to the drug injecting room. And earlier this week, a man had an episode on the street where he was screaming, swearing, exposing himself while covered in faeces. Now, I'm told this is not out of the ordinary. I drive past there regularly. I see stuff that should never be seen on a street in daylight or dark. It's terrifying stuff. Joining me now to discuss this, one of the residents who reached out, Sharon Nevin. I tell you, Sharon, I keep coming back to this story because the Premier ruled out a drug injecting room in the suburbs prior to the election a couple of years ago. And then when he got elected, it was a trial. You and I know it's never been a trial. It's now permanent. It's next to a primary school. You live this every day, yes. And it has the effect, doesn't it, of bringing all the dealers and all the bad behaviour to your suburban streets. What's going on?
So we were promised an injecting room that would potentially save lives and take the drugs off the street. All it has done is caused a massive drug trade, brought all of the users and the dealers from all over Melbourne, causing the cheapness of the drugs drawing people in. Mm-hmm. They don't want to use the injecting room, so they'll get the free drugs, they'll get their needles and they inject in the streets, they overdose in the streets. We watch the degradation of lives on a daily basis, months, years of watching people who have a chance of being recovered, finally getting to a point like that gentleman that can't be saved now. So now we if I can talk about the wall.
Yeah, I'll just get to that so people
yes.
understand. It's over $1 million.
Yes.
The Premier's announced funding for what will be an outdoor using facility. Let's call it a user's garden.
Yes.
What's this about? Because I didn't see this debated in the election campaign. Why do we need this as well? What do locals think about it?
Well, we're absolutely furious. We were told that there was community consultation in August of 2022. None of us heard about it until August of 2023, and it seems to have been lumped on us. Now, it goes against John Ryan's review, mm-hmm. and the one thing that we agreed with is that the provider should eliminate the congregation of users around the room, which means the community, the disadvantaged in the high rise, the mums with their babies, the elderly who want to use the community health centre are not confronted by this disgraceful behaviour. Mm-hmm. Now what we're doing is instead of eliminating the congregation, we're actually calling them in, come into this lovely garden that we're going to build you with seats and sheltering, a memorial wall for a man that died because of the inaction of the injecting room and North Richmond Community Health. Mm. And then we're building a wall to hide the problem. Rather
so
than
it won't
fixing
be visible
the problem,
to the media, won't be visible to residents.
Won't be visible to us, but we know what will go on behind there. There will be public injecting. The chance of people dying and no one seeing it. There will be stolen goods being sold. There'll be open dealing because, let's face it, the police aren't going to arrest anyone dealing drugs in that area, and they don't.
No, they don't.
And so it's just a recipe for disaster. Instead of fixing the problem and putting a tiny Band-Aid on it, they've actually ripped it all off and are now actually taking away safety, not only from the community, but from the users themselves. So if you're having users behind a wall injecting out of sight, mm-hmm. isn't that letting them down as well? So they have a room.
So talk to the rest of Melbourne about this idea of a drug injecting room, a second one in the CBD, because it's only less than 2 kilometres away.
Yes.
Why is one needed in the CBD, in and around all the restaurants and the theatre district? And what do you think that you live it? What do you think that's going to do to the Melbourne CBD?
Well, there shouldn't be one in the CBD, and if it's not good enough for the CBD, it's not good enough for Richmond. The thing is that Sydney has one. Over 20 years it has one. It doesn't have one in Mount Druitt, in Liverpool, in Cabramatta, in any of those Western Sydney suburbs where people are dying every day. Mm-hmm. But we need another one in our city. We know build it and they will come. It will destroy our city. the tourists will go, the students won't come. The mothers with their children bringing them in for shopping or events won't come. It will be filthy. It will bring in drug dealers and drug users. They will sit on the park bench because, listen, they're not going to get arrested there either because Melbourne will be a no-go zone as well. Your restaurants are going to be empty. The shops are going to be empty. It's just going to be a disaster.
You've been a fantastic community advocate. I mean, this has got to be taking a toll.
It's very distressing because we have the densest high-rise community that are too frightened to speak out because the government might take them away from their homes, might take their children and move them out somewhere, so they're too terrified to speak. I speak for the children, and I think that if the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. I don't care if I waste the next 20 years fighting this. I will keep doing it. It's for the love of my community, and Richmond is a wonderful, wonderful place that Mr Dan Andrews has just ruined for us and made it terrifying. I've got to check my mental health, and I'm a tough old bird, before I go out on the streets and walk past to go to the shops. I can only imagine what it's like for a little 3, 4, 5-year-old with their mother.
You come on this show anytime, because I have been fighting this issue as well.
Yes.
I live a suburb away, but you have an open invitation.
Thank you.
We have
Thank
got
you,
to stop
Peter.
this.
We do have to stop this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Sharon
it.
Nevin there.